Outstanding effort again.
We're busting ours to kick yours.
That's big time.
Minus 15.
Respect all, fear none.
Oh, did he belt that one?
Intensity is not a perfume.
It was a no-doubter.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
With the number 7 overall pick, the Baltimore Orioles have the chance to add one of the very best talents in the MLB draft, and we're very excited to have coverage of that for you here on MASN All Access. Hello, everyone. I'm Brendan Mortensen, joined by Annie Claff. And Annie, pencils are down. The mock drafts are done. It is finally go time.
Brendan, just as much as the MLB draft is the niche for Mike Elias and co here in Baltimore, it's kind of our thing here, too, at MASN All Access. Excited to see who goes number 7 overall. Yeah, this is our Super Bowl, in large part because of the fact that the Orioles have really been built through this MLB draft. You look out there at Camden Yards and you see names like Adley Rutschman, Gunnar Henderson, guys that were Orioles draft picks. This team drafted them, they developed them, and the Orioles have been one of the very best teams in baseball at doing just that since 2019. I took a look back at just how those numbers stack up compared to the rest of the league.
The very first MLB draft pick of the Mike Elias era is heading to his 3rd All-Star game. Adley Rutschman is back at the Midsummer Classic this year on a path that many thought was likely after he was the 1-1 in 2019. 41 picks later, Gunnar Henderson joined him as a Baltimore selection, forming one of the best 1-2 punches in a draft in recent history. Those two are the headliners in a really impressive group of homegrown talent in Baltimore. And with the number 7 overall pick in Saturday's draft, the O's have a chance to add even more firepower. But just how good have the Orioles been at drafting and developing homegrown talent since 2019? Before we dive into the numbers, let's say this. There's a few different ways to evaluate draft success. Basically, we can break it down into 2 categories. How many players have you drafted that have debuted, and how are those players performing at the big league level? But even then, that can be divided further based on circumstance. Did you trade draft assets early on for established big league talent? Did you develop them yourself? How often did you have the chance to draft a blue chip player? For this exercise in particular, let's say this. If an organization drafted and successfully signed a player, they get credit for that player making their major league debut, regardless of what organization they debuted for. It's a point for identifying the talent in the first place, even if you later traded them away. Players' production once they reach the majors is measured by Baseball Reference WAR, which in this case will only count if it's for the organization that drafted them. Basically, how productive have the guys that you've drafted been for your team? All right, enough of the rules, pre-qualifiers. Here are the numbers as of July 2nd. Dating back to 2019, that's the 7 draft classes since Mike Elias and company took the reins, the Orioles have gotten the most production out of the players they've drafted in baseball. The WAR produced solely by Baltimore's 2019 draft class would rank 5th on this list. It's the most of any team's draft class over this span. And look how they stack up against the AL East, more than doubling the Yankees in 2nd. Baltimore has drafted 18 players that have debuted for either them or another organization in that stretch. That's right around middle of the pack in baseball, tied with the Dodgers, Padres, Rays, Reds, and Yankees. But they've gotten the most production in baseball among the guys that have stayed with the team. And here's some specifics on those numbers again as of July 2nd. Henderson's 22.7 BWAR with the Orioles is the 2nd highest for any homegrown player since 2019. Adley Rutschman's 16.4 is 5th best. Despite going 30th overall in 2020 and unfortunately missing some time that would have boosted these numbers, Jordan Westburg still has the 6th best BWAR among homegrown talent in that draft. Colton Cowser's 4.2 BWAR is significantly higher than any other top 10 pick in the 2021 draft, homegrown or otherwise. Sal Frelick is the only player with a higher BWAR in the top 20. And finally, moving one more draft, Jackson Holliday is one of only 2 top 5 picks from 2022 to debut. The other is Kumar Rocker, who entered Pro Ball during his age 23 season. Holliday's got about 250 big league games under his belt now, and he's still 22. And of course, there is more to team success than just building through the MLB draft. You've got to hit on the trade market and free agency. You want to be firing on all cylinders, of course. But the draft operation built here in the warehouse in 2019 has been one of the best in baseball over the past 7 seasons. And they're not just doing it with top 5 picks. Remember, Henderson was a second rounder. Westy went 30th. Heck, they don't even get credit here for Brandon Young, who's having a spectacular season. He went undrafted. And with Baltimore's track record of success, that number 7 might just become another homegrown talent making a splash in the big leagues.
One of the very best teams in baseball at drafting and developing talent over the last 7 years. And could it be one of these guys that eventually wears orange and black with the Baltimore Orioles? Annie, when you look at this big board, kind of what is the story of the top of this draft?
I see a ton of position players, which is typically the bread and butter for the Orioles in the first round of the draft. Lots of hitters, especially out of college. For here, it's just that kind of realm for the Orioles. Unfortunately, they won't get to pick in the top 3 because there are a ton of toolsy players that the Orioles could go for there. They'll just have to wait who falls out of the consensus top 6 at pick number 7, and if no one does and it goes chalk in the top 6, then they'll have to go through a mess of college hitters that they very well like.
Yeah, we'll start with that top 3 that you mentioned there, Annie. There kind of seems to be a consensus group of guys that more than likely will not be available to the Orioles at number 7. Here's MLB Pipeline's Jonathan Mayo on that top tier of players.
And within that top 6, there's almost 2 tiers. I think the top 3 that everyone agrees on, UCLA shortstop Rock Chalowski, Texas high school shortstop Grady Emerson, and Georgia Tech catcher Von Lackey. And those are the top 3. And it's not a slam dunk that Chalowski goes number 1. He's kind of been the wire-to-wire number 1 prospect, but I do think that the White Sox are really strongly considering Emerson and Lackey to an extent. And then what the Rays do, it could be Emerson, it could be Lackey. I think the Twins take whoever's left. So I would be surprised if the top 3 don't go in the top 3 picks.
Right there in blue and yellow that you saw, a UCLA Bruin is Rock Chalowski, favored to be the number 1 overall pick to the White Sox. Their pick is in right now. Chalowski is the ultimate toolsy player. It's a 60 or above graded tool for everything except for the run tool. Also about Chalowski is that he is a baseball rat, lives and breathes the sport of baseball. Other 2 great options though in Grady Emerson, a high school shortstop with really good bat to ball skills and some power upside, really smooth defense at that shortstop position as well. Von Lackey, someone the Orioles would have loved if they had the opportunity to pick in the top 3. Really good defensive value as a catcher out of Georgia Tech, and the power is there for him as well.
Yeah, you kind of have to imagine as the White Sox pick is in here at number 1 that Grady Emerson might be that 2nd overall pick, followed by Von Lackey at number 3. Those guys had stats all year long that jumped off the page. But of course, there's a lot more to drafting a prospect than just that. And Andy took a look at some of the off-the-field intangibles that go in to scouting a draft prospect.
When it comes to the MLB draft, you often hear the term tools, the physical skill sets of a draft prospect. For hitters, it's the hit tool, power, run, arm, and field. Pitchers, it varies a little bit more based on their pitch offerings, but there's always a control tool. Those skills and the stats that go along with them don't stand alone, though. A big part of scouting the next potential big leaguer is finding the intangible assets, the character, the work ethic, things you can't necessarily find on a stat sheet.
Every year, we value it more and more because whatever their stats are, whatever their tools are, like you said, what they're going to do when they enter the system, how they're going to work and influence their teammates is so impactful.
That's why baseball is so much different than like other sports where it's not the biggest, fastest, strongest that make it. You know, there's some mental resiliency you have to have. You got to be a good person.
On top of being a good person, the most important intangible for college baseball Hall of Famer and former number 1 overall pick to the Orioles, Ben McDonald, is handling pressure.
Who are the ones that can really, when the lights get the brightest, they really love that environment. They feast on that environment.
So how does a Major League Baseball team pull out the intangibles of a draft prospect in a process that's already started for next year?
We flipped the draft cycle around, which the 2027 class is underway right now. or try to identify key prospects and really get to know the player, their support system around them, their family. We did in-home visits. This year we made an emphasis to do that. There's Zoom calls. There's getting to know people in the community who can give an opinion, hopefully, unfiltered opinions if you can get those. So there's a lot of work to understand who you're investing in just outside of the baseball field.
Sometimes there are even some go-to questions, like for Assistant Director of Domestic Scouting, Chad Tatum.
My favorite one is probably just tell me about your experience kind of getting up to this point, letting them kind of walk through how they got here. It's a way to learn kind of what's important to them, most influential people in their lives, and then kind of the work that's gone into it.
Second-round lefty arm Joseph Jerwa out of last year's draft class told me that at the Combine, his conversation with O's scouts was about where the development process is going and where he wants to improve. Jerwa said that he wants to make the breaking ball more consistent, and he's so far impressed with a .230 ERA on the season and already getting promoted to AA. More data and information is available for scouting college players versus high school ones. There can also be a mental benefit to picking a college athlete, especially out of an elite conference.
For some of these kids in the SEC that get to play in front of 12 or 13,000 every weekend, I think it's an advantage for them. When you get teams that show up like West Virginia and Troy and teams like that don't have a big following, and there's 2,000 people, if that, in the stands, it's different when you get to Omaha. So it's all how you handle it.
Even the ultimate numbers guy, the director of draft analytics for the Orioles, Mike Weiss, knows the value of these intangibles. Now it's just a matter of quantifying them.
Guys we've gotten and have been really successful because of things like their makeup, their work ethic. But I think it's definitely one of the most challenging things to try to quantify. So I think we do our best to try to come up with ways to measure how a guy is in terms of work ethic or things like that. But it's really hard to measure for some.
The advancement in tech and numbers and data, which at this very moment, I think everyone has to acknowledge and love and use, but also you also have to acknowledge that the players on the field create that data set, and that's never going to change.
In a day and age when analytics is massive, it's still not quite everything.
A lot more than just the numbers that go into drafting, especially here in the top 10 for the Baltimore Orioles. Rock Chalowski already off the board, the #1 overall pick of the Chicago White Sox. And Annie, as we take another look here at the big board, the Orioles have the #7 overall pick. What are we looking at as an Orioles fan? What really jumps out here?
If you're looking for the Orioles to take a pitcher in the first round, then you better be leaning on right-handed pitcher Jackson Flora, ranked at #4, to fall to the Orioles at #7. While that's unlikely because he's a very big physical righty out of a pitcher's paradise in UC Santa Barbara, there are some really great other bat options, especially in the college crop for the Orioles, that they've tended to lean to as well. Sitting right at 5 and 6, there are two really good high school bat options as well in Jacob Lombard, Eric Booth Jr. Baseball America's Carlos Collazo took a look into those two high school options for the Orioles.
Two really intriguing high school position players in Jacob Lombard, who's a shortstop out of Florida, the younger brother of George Lombard, who is a prospect in the Yankee system, and then Eric Booth Jr., who maybe has the most exciting contact, power, speed combination in this class. I think both Lombard and Booth arguably have the most upside in the high school class. Grady Emerson, who I mentioned earlier, is more of this hit tool oriented, really safe, well-rounded profile, who's maybe the best pure hitter in the class. But both Lombard and Booth have massive upside potential if they hit. And I think both of these guys are also maybe the most likely of this kind of group of names to get to the Orioles at #7.
Eric Booth Jr. and Jacob Lombard, two really intriguing high school options here for the Orioles. One high school option they will not be able to take is Grady Emerson, who most people thought would either go #1 or #2 overall. He goes #2 to the Tampa Bay Rays. Annie, I want to start with Eric Booth Jr. here, the Vanderbilt commit. I think what really jumps off the page for him is that run tool. It's a 70 grade on MLB Pipeline, an 80 grade on Baseball America. We're talking Enrique Bradfield Jr. type of speed, but the hit and the power tools maybe jump out a little bit more too.
For Eric Booth Jr., that speed is exactly what you want out of an Orioles draft pick. That's something that the Orioles themselves have said in the past. They love the athleticism. With these two options in Eric Booth Jr. and Jacob Lombard, they are the best athletes out of that consensus top 6, so it works out well for the Orioles sitting at pick number 7 if either Booth Jr. or Lombard fall to that number pick. Another thing about Booth Jr. that's really great, you mentioned the bat-to-ball skills, the swing decisions. It's also great with that power. It's a 6-foot frame at 207 pounds, built like a running back. So that power is in there. It might not seem like it with the 50 graded tool, but there is 20-25 home run potential out of Booth Jr.
Yeah, and him, you have a prospect who ran in the 6.3s in a 60-yard dash, and also somebody who won a home run derby in one of the high school circuits. Now for Lombard, that's probably the thing that jumps out, just that, the last name Lombard. His brother, George Jr., is the top prospect in the Yankee system, one of the best prospects in baseball right now, and his dad, also a coach in Major League Baseball. We know the Orioles have had some history with drafting guys whose last names you remember a little bit. Of course, Jackson Holliday comes to mind there. But what really stands out to you for the shortstop prospect, Jacob Lombard?
Well, you heard me talk about the importance of the intangibles, the familial background, having his dad, his brother there, also the resources at the big league level. His dad, George Sr., was the first base coach at the World Baseball Classic. Lombard said he learned a ton from Bryce Harper and just working on his routine. Not too shabby of a player to be learning from. The power itself for Lombard is also a really key factor for that player profile. There are some concerns on the swing and miss a little bit, but there are advanced swing decisions from Lombard. So that's something you can lean into to work on that hit tool upside for a high school bat like Lombard.
Yeah, it's a bit of an interesting profile because there are some swing and miss concerns, but it's not necessarily because of his swing decisions. It's more so just the width there. So I think if you're drafting Lombard, you're betting on that hit tool upside because the other tools are just so good. You've talked about the consensus top 6 prospects in this draft, Annie. Booth Jr. and Lombard are among that group, so Baltimore is hoping that maybe one of those guys falls to them. If they go in the top 6, the Orioles would likely be selecting among a really talented group of college hitters. Those guys are no slouch either. Drew Burress is probably the standout there from Georgia Tech. And for more on that group of college guys, here's our own Ben McDonald.
Drew Burress is a undersized outfielder, as y'all know. Only they say they list him at 5'9". They say he may not be that tall.
It's a generous 5'9",
yes.
Yeah.
But I remember he burst on the scene his freshman year at Georgia Tech. He hit 25 home runs as a freshman. He's hit 60 home runs in 3 years. Like, the pop is real. Most scouts feel like he can handle center field. Like, he moves good enough. Again, like Curiel, not an absolute burner, but a really good jump, gets good reads on balls from what I've been told. Right-handed hitter, which, you know, are you looking for a left-hander or are you looking for a right-hander? I mean, I think those are all the decisions at the Orioles, but I would not be disappointed in that call either, because I think he's performed in the Power 4 conference really well over at Georgia Tech in the ACC, and he's put up big numbers every year. And you talk to his coach, and I've talked to his coaches, they really love him. They say he's a baller, he's a gamer, he's all those things. And so he'd be a guy, if the Orioles took him, I wouldn't be disappointed either. Switch hitting shortstop, better from the left side, a little more power. I've seen him a couple of times. He's real at shortstop. Like, he can really defend. He made 3 errors the whole year long. Switch hitter, obviously. And I went back to look what he hit in SEC play, because that's when I get to these Southeastern Conference kids, I like to see your overall numbers, but then I want to see how you did in that 30-game schedule. And I get it's a sample size, because a guy can get in a funk in a sample size, but he hit well over 300 in Southeastern Conference play alone. And so it tells me that he's a real bat. There's not a ton of pop there, but if you're looking for a sure shortstop, a guy that can stick at the shortstop position, he's certainly one of those guys that can stick there. So catchers don't have to think about reading bats and seeing what I'm seeing and putting fingers down or pushing buttons or whatever they're doing. I think that because he's there, that makes him advanced. Talking to some scouts about him, they loved. I mean, he's a number 1 defensive run save catcher in the college game right now. Frames the ball better than anybody. Could be a big asset. Yes, there's pop in the bat. There's some swing and miss there too, but they say he is an elite defender behind home plate. And so I like that about him. Gold glove caliber catcher that really can throw the ball well with some pop in his bat. But, you know, Van Lackey over at Georgia Tech is obviously going to be the number 1 catcher, but most scouts think that Helfrich could be the second catcher to come off the draft board. So if the Orioles are looking for a catcher, he should be right in that range for him.
Takeaway here for me, if the consensus top 6 goes in the top 6 picks, Orioles fans, you're not going to be disappointed with the group of college bats that could be available for Baltimore at pick number 7. I think Drew Burress is probably the highlight of this group, and he's perhaps the player that has been linked to the Orioles the most nationally.
Burress has got an elite combination of both the hit tool and the power tool. It was a career 60 home runs for his time with Georgia Tech. That's where the power comes from. It's not necessarily from his frame because he is a little bit undersized at 5'9", but the power is still there. You see that 1100 OPS, and it comes with good swing decisions and not chasing too much. Similarly with Tyler Bell, the shortstop out of Kentucky, that's where you see really elite swing decisions, some of the best strike zone judgment in this entire draft class.
Yeah, the .510 on base percentage for Tyler Bell. The sample size a little bit smaller because he did deal with some injuries this year, but that really jumps off the page, especially as a switch hitting shortstop. You want to talk about a really, really premium thing there with those two tools. And then there's Ryder Helfrich, who I think is a really interesting name, particularly for the Orioles, because we've seen Baltimore prioritize catchers. We've seen them prioritize catchers that display really good defensive tools as well. So Helfrich out of Arkansas, I think, is a possibility for the O's too.
The Orioles did that twice in last year's first round. It was Caden Bodine out of Coastal Carolina and also Ike Irish. For Irish, it was leaning on the bat. So now, since then, Irish has switched to more of an outfielder first base position and not so much the catching. For Helfrich, you would stay at the catching position because it's really mature game calling as a catcher at this age and stage in the development process that's yet to begin, and also a really solid arm at 65 grade. That's out of an 80 scale. Yeah, you want to talk about intangibles and the importance of that. A college catcher who calls pitches, who can handle a pitching staff like that, that is something that is really, really important. Speaking of really good college catchers, Von Lackey goes to the Twins with the number 3 overall pick. And Annie, not to say this is where the draft really gets fun, but I think we kind of knew that those top 3 guys were going to go in the top 3 in some order. So now you're really starting to look at things with the San Francisco Giants on the clock at number 4, and you're going, okay, I don't know which direction this is going in. And as an Orioles fan, you're really intrigued by what this number 4 pick is. Especially because that right-hander out of UC Santa Barbara, Jackson Flora, is still on the board. This is where things get a little bit murkier for the Orioles. It was those number 3 that could have happened in any significant order. Right now, this is where somebody could shoot up the board that wasn't expected. For last year's draft, that was Tyler Bremner that jumped into the second round, another pitcher out of UC Santa Barbara. So after Jackson Flora, if he flies off the board right now at pick number 4, you still have really good high school hitting options and a ton of college bats that we just talked about. Yeah, if you had a mock draft, it might be perfect 1 through 3, but the Giants might mess it up for you here at number 4. We've heard a lot about the high school bats. We've heard a lot about the college bats. But what are some of the pros and cons of drafting a guy out of high school versus drafting a college bat? Here's Just Baseball's Aram Layton on that topic.
I think if you have the player development infrastructure and you feel really confident in it, the upside because of the unknown that comes with a high school guy is immense. You also have the downside of that as well. But then the opposite end of the spectrum there, or I guess the flip side of it is, with the way that college baseball has just become more and more impressive with the pitching that they have to see day in and day out, you have a little bit more confidence in the data set and what you're able to see from the batted ball data and also just contact rate, all those different things. Because you have a little bit more confidence in that translating to at least the lower levels and knowing what you've got there. So I think there's a little bit higher of a confidence interval with these college players because they're facing better pitching than we've really ever seen at the collegiate level. But you could also say a lot of the same things about these high school kids because they're seeing more velocity. You're getting to see high school kids tested with velocity generally more frequently than we ever have in the past. So it's not as big and crazy of a leap as before. I still think, as we've seen in the recent drafts too, there's been high school kids snagged in the second, third round. And within a year, we're already saying, man, how did that guy fall out of the first round? So there's the unknown that can work to your benefit, but also work against you with the high school guys. That'll always be the case. And I think with college, the floor seems to be pushed a little bit higher. We're seeing those guys move more quickly than ever.
Back to the big board we go. And there's 2 names that I want to talk about here. One of them is not even on this big board, but let's start with the one who is MLB Pipeline's number 9 prospect, Justin LeBron. He is a really interesting case, and maybe some teams could vary pretty widely on their evaluation of him because he is a toolsy player. They jump off the board, the power-speed combo, but he didn't hit well in SEC play. What can you tell me about LeBron?
Like we saw with Eric Booth Jr., was a little bit of leaning on the power and speed upside combo. That's going to be the same here with Justin LeBron, two of the best athletes in the entire draft class, and definitely in that top 10 draft board graphic that you saw. For LeBron, it's a 60 grade power tool, 70 grade speed. Sometimes LeBron can get a little aggressive outside of the zone. That's something that the Orioles haven't necessarily been too shy of in recent draft picks. We saw that out of Golden Spikes Award winner Vahiva Aloy out of Arkansas. That was an Orioles first rounder last year. Something that the Orioles have confidence in to be able to develop that and work on the hit tool and swing and miss with a little bit of these draft prospects. Something with LeBron is going to be very similar to that facet.
Now, on the flip side, there's MLB Pipeline's number 12 prospect, Derek Curiel, out of LSU, the outfielder. Bit more of a slap hitter, maybe. Ben McDonald kind of likened him to that mid-90s kind of approach where he's going to make a lot of contact, he's going to make a lot of smart swing decisions. What does his power upside potentially look like, Annie? And why could the Orioles potentially value him at number 7?
Well, first of all, Ben McDonald, of course, is going to like Curiel because of the LSU background.
Yeah, no bias there whatsoever. Yeah.
Right, both of which alums from there. But for Curiel, it's definitely going to be a hit over power combination and player profile. A lot of line drives, not necessarily slugging and pop out of Curiel. It's a 60 grade hit tool. That's something I really want to emphasize because if the Orioles decide to go more of this direction with Curiel as opposed to a Justin LeBron where it's more power upside, then they're going to lean a little bit more towards the bat to ball skills, something the Orioles haven't necessarily done in the first round draft pick in quite some time for Curiel.
Now here's where I said the draft got interesting at the number 4 overall pick, and the San Francisco Giants went with UC Santa Barbara right-handed pitcher Jackson Flora. And this brings us to an interesting spot when looking at the Orioles pick at number 7. We've said it in our draft coverage leading up to today, Annie, that if Flora were to fall to Baltimore with the number 7 overall pick, he could be a strong possibility. We heard that from Jonathan Mayo, Carlos Collazo, and others. He is now off the board. So in your opinion, does that kind of eliminate the chance for a pitcher here at number 7?
It does for me because I think Flora was going to be the best chance for the Orioles to take a pitcher in the first round. If Flora had fallen to pick number 7, I don't think that there was a world where the Orioles could have passed up on that opportunity. Coming out of UC Santa Barbara, there is a ton of talent. It's become a pitching paradise with Tyler Bremner, who went 2nd overall, Shane Bieber, a Cy Young winner as well. It's an elite fastball that sits in the 96-97 range, physical and passionate on the mound. You can see that even here right now. The celebrations after the strikeouts, that's the kind of intangible that the Orioles and scouts all over the country are looking for. In terms of other pitching name options, I'm not sure how much the Orioles can lean into that because there's a high schooler in lefty Gio Rojas, some other college names as well. The thing is, the thick of the draft board right now and who's left are elite college position players, something the Orioles have done so much in recent history, especially under Mike Elias.
Yeah, you mentioned it a little bit, Annie. Humor me a little bit. If the Orioles were to go with a pitcher at number 7, who are some names that jump out to you?
Gio Rojas, that lefty out of high school. It's out of Stoneman Douglas, a very elite high school that Kobe Mayo, the Orioles third baseman right now, has come out of. Anthony Rizzo, Jesus Luzardo. That's what Gio Rojas has even said. He has got a great relationship with Jesus Luzardo. So a lot to like from in this young lefty arm. When it comes to lefties and high school pitchers and just being as athletic as Rojas is, it's hard to pass up on that opportunity. Things with high school pitchers, though, is it can be very unpredictable. Same with those high school hitters. But for arms, it's a little bit more murky, and you're taking a lot more of a chance and risk on the upside and reward.
Yeah, well, we know the Orioles have gone with position players over the last 7 drafts in the first round, but they did have some success with second-round pitchers last year in Michigan State's Joseph Jerwa and Georgia's J.T. Quinn. And for a little bit more on why the Orioles liked those guys, here's Assistant Director of Draft Operations, Hendrik Hurst.
There's a lot of combining factors, whether it's, velocity, command, the ability to spin the ball, or, feel for a changeup. There's so many different things. And most of the time we're trying to weigh, even this morning, this guy does this thing, that guy does the other thing, which would you rather work with? So it's really hard. But, they were both big dudes that had really good stuff. Jerwa had really good fastball command. He was a really good athlete. So it's just leaning on the things you really like about them, and then getting to know the person when you can, whether it's the combine or through Zoom.
Well, hers is part of a kind of new look draft operation here for the Orioles. It's a lot of the same faces overseeing things, but some new guys really leading the charge day to day. And one of those names is Will Robertson, who's kind of leading the draft charge here today for the Baltimore Orioles. Here's the former Orioles draft pick on his first draft and what that means for him today.
I was taken in the 30th round in 2017 by the Orioles. And then as soon as my career was wrapping up, was fortunate enough to latch on into the front office in a pro scouting role, came up under Mike Snyder and the pro scouting group. And then the last couple of years, I've had a couple of different titles, but have evaluated players in various markets, pro, international, and really started diving into the draft the past couple of years. And then this is my first year fully diving headfirst into the draft, and it's been a lot of fun.
Well, this is your first year in charge of the draft after getting promoted recently. In your opinion, what about your role in last year's draft led to you being in charge this time around?
Yeah, I think that's a question for the person who made that decision, but I do think I got exposed to a lot of the top talent in the recent drafts, going out and seeing the players, starting to understand the market of this is what this caliber of prospect, the high school level looks like at the college level. It was a lot different being kind of an advocate for players or, just an individual contributor versus sort of overseeing the evaluation process and kind of trying to bring together a collective opinion of the entire group. So a big adjustment there, but definitely learned a lot of lessons and, saw how the department was run with Matt, and we still have a lot of influences from the tip top, with people with a lot of draft success with Mike and Sig, and learned a lot of lessons just being in the room and discussing players and seeing how, okay, this is sort of how to bring in all the opinions, all the information, and hopefully get it to a point where we make informed choices.
Yeah, and scouting is a process where you've got a bunch of people in a lot of different places that are all gathering a ton of information on different guys. Leading up to the draft, what does the process look like for that to all finally come together?
Yeah, it's a huge task, and I think that that is one of the biggest challenges of the job is you have a ton of remote employees, and you want to make sure you feel like it's a collective effort, and so that requires a lot of communication, either me directly with the scouts. We also have Chad Tatum and Hendrick Hurst, the assistant directors, who are in constant communication with the scouting staff. So we are hearing what's going on the grounds from our scouts all year long, as well as getting out and people in the office getting out and seeing players themselves. So it's just this constant communication. We try to have systems in place to, okay, you write your scouting report. This is included in the system. Obviously, the performance and the stats are being measured and looking for predictive information in that. And then, the next 2 weeks is going to be the really fun part of lining it all up.
Well, the Orioles didn't draft a pitcher, but we've still got a curveball here in the top 5 as the Pittsburgh Pirates just selected Derek Curiel, a name that we threw out there as a potential Orioles pick at number 7. Wasn't among the top 10 prospects on MLB Pipeline's board, but this is what we've tried to tell you leading up to the draft. There may have been a consensus top 6 prospects, but the MLB draft rarely goes chalk. So, Annie, this means that the Orioles will have at least 2 of Jacob Lombard, Eric Booth Jr., and Drew Burress available for them at number 7.
For having that trio of hitters available at pick number 7, you could go one of 2 different directions. For Lombard and Booth Jr., you're leaning on a little bit more upside, whether that's the athleticism, the speed, the power for both of them, and also the defensive capabilities, specifically for Lombard at shortstop. Or the Orioles could go with a Drew Burress, a college hitter that you pretty much know what you're getting at this point in time. You're not going to lean a little bit more on filling out a physical frame because he's undersized at 5'9", but you know what you're getting, available to stick at center field with a solid arm and the power, the 60 career home runs in 3 college baseball seasons.
Yeah, as Aram kind of talked about, you're weighing the high school guys versus the college guys, where the high school upside of a Lombard or a Booth Jr. is immense. There are probably going to be some things to tweak, but you don't really know what you're going to get out of these guys in a good way, because you're thinking it's going to be something really, really great, and it certainly could be for Booth Jr. or Lombard. But then, on the flip side of that, you've got a Drew Burress out of Georgia Tech who, okay, what is the maximum upside with him? You mentioned some of the frame concerns a little bit at just 5'9", but ultra productive. It didn't matter for the guy. He's got monster exit velocities. He hit a ton of home runs for Georgia Tech, and as the Royals pick is in, this is another surprise. It is Zion Rose to the Kansas City Royals, which means, Annie, the Orioles have their pick of these three guys that we have really highlighted here, Booth Jr., Lombard, and Drew Burress. Of course, they still could go outside of those top three, but these three names have all been linked to Baltimore, and as the Orioles are now on the clock with the number 7 overall pick, they've got their pick of the litter. I don't know if this could have fallen any better for them at number 7.
As things tend to happen for the Orioles in the draft, and same with the Baltimore Ravens, if you're a Baltimore sports fan in general, is having picks fall to you and work things that you wanted them. Because in last year's draft, it was Ike Irish falling, Vahiva Aloy falling to their first-round picks. What I love about Burress in this situation, out of this crop of 3 amazing hitters, is that it's a combination of those loud exit velocities. Burress has touched 117 miles per hour off the bat at one point this season, but it comes with really solid and sound swing decisions. That's not something that you typically get every single pick option in a draft.
Yeah, and let's kind of put all of those 3 guys into a group. They are obviously very distinct options in what they bring to the table, but they all have the intangibles and the makeup and the tools that the Orioles typically look for in a draft pick, which is why we've highlighted them. Good athletes. That is maybe the number one thing that we have seen from the Orioles dating back to their draft picks in 2019 when Mike Elias and company first took over. I think good athletes is probably number one. Making loud exit velocities is another one too. Doing damage to the baseball, I think that is a big one for the Orioles. And all 3 of these guys play a premium defensive position. We know the Orioles like to go up the middle, draft catchers, draft shortstops, draft center fielders. In Booth Jr. and Burress, you have a pair of center fielders, and then in Lombard, you have a shortstop.
There also aren't really that many options in this specific draft class for positions that aren't outside or up down the middle, because there's another option in third baseman Ace Reese out of Mississippi State, but he's not going to be that specific premium down the middle position. Ace Reese provides a ton of power, some of the best power in this entire college draft class, but not so much the defensive value and athleticism. When you look at Booth Jr., Lombard, and Drew Burress as well, you're going to get more of that defensive value, even if it doesn't necessarily jump off the page for specific tools.
Yeah, let's look on the margins a little bit, because we don't want to totally zero in on these 3 players unless in case the Orioles surprise us here a little bit. So you mentioned Ace Reese as a possibility. Chris Hacopian is another one that kind of falls into that category of, okay, he doesn't play one of those premium positions, but the hit tool really jumps off the page.
The hit tool is definitely what Hacopian is going to be drafted for. It's elite bat-to-ball skills. The only question marks that I have for Hacopian is that there isn't that much athleticism compared to some of these other elite athletes that are still on the board, like the Booth Juniors, the Lombards, the even Justin LeBrons. I think we've heard a common theme and consensus for Orioles front office members is how important the athleticism is and the defensive value. I'm not so sure that you are going to get that out of Chris Hacopian. However, you're going to love the .319 batting average, .405 on-base percentage, and elite bat-to-ball skills that the Orioles could revert a little bit back to in this draft.
So as the Orioles are now currently on the clock at number 7, we want to make sure we hit all of our bases here, Annie. So is there anybody that we haven't mentioned? We've talked about Tyler Bell, Ryder Helfrich, Justin LeBron. Is there anybody we haven't talked about that we should at least throw into the conversation here for Baltimore at number 7?
There's another high school option in Trevor Condon that has a little bit less of a physicality element to him, is slightly oversized as well at 5'11", but what is really great about Condon is the same kind of hit over power technique and player profile. The athleticism really jumps off the page for Condon as well. He's jumped up in MLB pipeline rankings, Baseball America rankings as well, the closer getting to the draft, so I don't think you can necessarily rule out Condon just yet.
There are plenty of options available for the Orioles at number 7 as the top 6 went. Maybe this is kind of a dream for them in how it goes, but the pick is in for Baltimore, and it is Eric Booth Jr., the high school outfielder, one of the fastest players in this draft class. He's got a really intriguing hit tool, a ton of power to him as well. Annie, all draft process, we thought if he falls to the Orioles, he seems like he could be the guy, and now he officially is.
It feels a little bit like the best player available model for the Orioles at pick number 7. Even though Jacob Lombard was ranked higher than Booth Jr., I think that the Orioles are going to get a ton out of this power speed upside combo out of Booth Jr. Like I mentioned before, built like a running back at 6-foot frame with 207 pounds to him. That's where the power comes from. That's where the speed comes from. That's why he ran a 6.33 60-yard dash. To put that into a little bit of perspective for the more relative sense, a 40-yard dash, it'd be about 4.35 or 4.4. That is really, really fast. Something that you're going to get out of Eric Booth Jr. is athleticism, it's power upside, even if it doesn't necessarily have eye-popping tools because it only says 50 grade for the power. That's not necessarily true. That's where you have the importance of the scouts and watching a player, not just the numbers.
Yeah, this reminds me a little bit of the current top prospect in the Orioles system, according to MLB Pipeline, Nate George, where, okay, the power upside isn't totally there yet, but you look at Nate George play baseball and you go, okay, this frame is going to result in some power. And I think that's the thinking here with Eric Booth Jr. Yes, he has the speed upside, but the bat is also really advanced. And for him as well, the swing is a little bit funky, even though he does some really great things with it. His hands are out a little bit, brings it back in. But I think for an Orioles fan watching these highlights and seeing a bit of an unconventional swing, I would point you to right field at Camden Yards, where the Orioles have Dylan Beavers, who was a high draft pick a couple of years ago out of Cal. He had a really funky left-handed swing, goes through the minor leagues, and he's got everybody saying, well, he's not going to get up there unless he changes the swing. Guess what? He didn't really change the swing all that much, and he's having a lot of success at the big league level.
What's interesting at this pick in drafting a high school hitter in the top 10, the Orioles, it's the first time they've been in the top 10 since 2022 when the Orioles drafted high school hitter Jackson Holliday number 1 overall. Of course, things are different at number 1 overall to pick number 7, but leaning on this high school power upside, the hit tool, just putting the ball in play for both of them, Holliday and Booth Jr., you can see a little bit of correlations with slightly shorter but built, especially how Holliday is now at the big league level.
Sure.
And the power for both of them is still in the tank. It's there. It's something you're going to lean on a little bit more. Booth Jr.'s got the really awesome combination of consistent contact, bat-to-ball skills out the wazoo, and same goes with that power. It's just going to have to work a little bit more, and there's more time and emphasis that goes into developing these high school hitters. Not to mention that they're also more malleable than a college one because you're starting it earlier on in the process.
Yeah, more than likely we're not going to see Booth Jr. up at the big leagues for a decent amount of time. This is how high school draft picks go. But as we continue to emphasize, man, the run tool jumps off the page. He is also a really advanced hitter. Want to keep that in mind here for Booth Jr. And for the Orioles, this is another position player drafted in the first round. This is now the 8th consecutive draft where they have selected a hitter in the first round under Mike Elias. And I know a lot of folks will say, man, they really could have gone for a pitcher. But Annie, I think at this point, when you look at the Orioles farm system, their strength really is in the starting pitching already. And it was kind of the position player side that could have used an injection of life.
There were 2 different approaches that the Orioles could have taken in this draft because of that element, the strength on the farm system in the pitchers. Last year's draft class featured second rounders Joseph Jerwa and JT Quinn. Those were the highest up draft picks for a pitcher at any moment in Mike Elias's career, and it's worked out so far so well for both of those pitcher draft picks. At this stage on the farm system, the pitchers really just highlight and headline the entire talent group. So the Orioles could have gone one of 2 different directions. You keep maintaining that confidence in drafting pitchers and building them up and developing the same way that you've done so far in the early stages for Jerwa and Quinn, or you take a look at the quality of talent you already have at the farm system for those pitchers in Joseph Jerwa, JT Quinn, Boston Bateman acquired at the trade deadline, 3 amazing names at the AAA Norfolk level as well, and say, we got to bolster a little bit more on the position player front, and that seems to be the way that it's gone. Also, just the way that the draft class was formed this year, it wouldn't have made sense for the Orioles to lean on another college arm or even a high school arm, something that they haven't done in higher than the 5th round in 4 years or however long it's been since Mike Elias took the reins in 2019. It just made sense to go with a position player here with the strength of the draft class.
Yeah, Eric Booth Jr., we are going to hear more from the Orioles shortly here after this pick is made. But I wouldn't be surprised if Booth Jr. was just the top player on their board of the guys remaining. The 17-year-old outfielder out of Oak Grove High School. We mentioned he is kind of built like a fullback. His dad was a record-breaking kick returner at Southern Miss. That's where Booth Jr.'s speed comes from, but he's got an advanced plate approach as well with plenty of power potentially to come. Eric Booth Jr., the selection for the Orioles at number 7 overall, but we are far from done breaking down this draft pick here on MASN. In, I don't know, maybe just a few minutes, we're going to hop over to our Bird's Nest studios. We're going to podcast about this selection here as the draft continue to roll along. We're going to talk about this Orioles selection of Eric Booth Jr., some of the other options that were on the board for them there, and then how the rest of this draft continues to shake out. But thank you so much for following along with us live here on MASN All Access. We hope you were able to catch us on our MASN Orioles Facebook page, our YouTube channel, our Twitter channel as well. And we hope you enjoyed this coverage of the Orioles' number 7 overall pick. Eric Booth Jr., the high school outfielder, is the Baltimore selection. A huge thank you to Danny Tao, to Bobby Blanco behind the scenes for producing this one. For Annie Claff, I am Brennan Mortensen. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.